Hi, everybody. This is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome to our weekly update. We're going to focus in on the Middle East. Just a reminder, you want to grab the PDF PowerPoint that accompanies this presentation. There's always more information in that than what we have time for. So we're going to jump right into our news bites. By the way, you can get that just as a link on your YouTube page there. We always start with our news bites. Bottom line, it's a matter of hours, maybe days, until the 7th Armored Brigade of the IDF invades southern Lebanon from the ground. It's just a matter of time. This is our news bite, so it's just sort of a popcorn sort of thing here. The president of Israel has claimed that the reason why some of these targeted assassinations have been taking place of the upper echelon leadership of Hezbollah is it was discovered that there was a planned invasion of the northern Galilee area, much like what took place on October 7th. When I read this, I thought, true that. This coming out of Israel says, when the UN Secretary General speaks about the release of our hostages, have you noticed that the UN Assembly is silent? But when it speaks about the suffering in Gaza, there are thunderous applauses that take place. This, once again, is an opening signal of the annual show of hypocrisy. Senators Tom Cotton and Mitch McConnell are criticizing the Biden administration for delaying the sending of tractors, helicopters, and bombs to Israel. They're slow playing this. Once again, they've done it in the past. And again, this Republican side is basically saying you're impairing Israel and not giving them the chance to actually end this war. And then from Hezbollah, it's come out, the statistics of the pager and the walkie-talkie explosions. We're told that it took about 1,500 fighters out of action. And then for our regular articles, Bibi is on his way. If not, I think he's landed by now in D.C. He'll be speaking to the UN tomorrow. But he wants to make his message crystal clear. He says of what's taken place in the north with Hezbollah, he's saying if they have not understood by now the message, I'm going to promise you they will understand the message. We will do whatever it takes to restore security and to get our people back to their homes on the northern border. Bottom line. And then, this is a couple days old, this article about a tipping point because it's already been crossed. But basically, the idea was because everything that's been taking place up north, obviously, it's escalated. But, it was sort of a tit for tat. And mostly it was just the northern border areas. But the tipping point of this ground invasion that I've been referring to, the article basically says when we see Hezbollah starting to target Haifa, Tel Aviv, central Israel, when we see that taking place, it's just a matter of time for a ground invasion. And as we know, it's already happened. In fact, the recent attacks, just a list here, Mossad was targeted, the headquarters in Tel Aviv, with a ballistic rocket. There were 2 Israelis that were slightly injured in a suicide drone attack on the southern port city of Eilat. We know that there were military bases in the Jordan Valley that were targeted by drones from Hezbollah. And again, what we've seen take place, rockets This last slide here, I probably won't get to it, but make sure you check it out. Can you imagine the rockets that have been launched throughout the northern border, Haifa, the Galilee, not just the northern Galilee, Nazareth, central. It's just frightening and overwhelming to see what's taken place. And these are the recent attacks. And then we have all this diplomacy, this talk about a ceasefire. I read this article I'm going to give to you. I want you to pay attention to the end to Mike Gallagher, who's I think he's a House of Representative from Wisconsin, his comments. But it's entitled The Audacity of a Ceasefire. And it says, for an entire year, Hezbollah has been bombing Israel. Dozens of civilians and soldiers have been killed. Settlements have been destroyed. Tens of thousands of acres have been set ablaze. 50, 60, 70,000 people, residents of the northern border areas, have had to flee their homes. And all of this has happened because Hezbollah chose to intervene in a conflict that it had no part in. They wanted to show Hamas, another terrorist group, by the way, that they were supporting them. And so now, with all that Israel has taken from starting October 8th, Israel has finally responded. They've succeeded in dramatically weakening Hezbollah. It's, by the way, the largest terror organization in the world. And now the U.S. and France are proposing what? An immediate ceasefire. Truth is, it would be foolish for Israel to agree to any kind of proposal. As you know, terrorist organizations look at ceasefire as simply a chance to what? Rearm. The pager, the walkie-talkie, genius, it has crippled. The assassinations of leading Hezbollah officers has crippled communications, and at this point in time, Hezbollah is in a sense on the run, and for Israel to cease fire now would be foolish. This is that quote from Mike Gallagher. I'd like to propose a new theory of international relations. I call it winning. You have to win the war in order to impose the terms of peace. And so this article is kind of truth and clarity. You can read it in detail, but it's the hypocrisy of diplomacy. Countries just behind the scenes, we know this. The U.S., the Biden administration, simply is wanting to keep any sort of major outbreak of war of taking place in order, in their minds, to secure the election in November. They're working hard on getting some sort of rhetoric of a ceasefire, hostages released, so it could be a feather in their cap or whatever. So I don't put too much stock in these diplomatic conversations that will be taking place. Although I will say this, it'll be very interesting over the next few days to see what comes out of Bibi Netanyahu's speech in the UN and the meetings that will be taking place there. I find it interesting that this ceasefire statement from the U.S. and France happens while Bibi Netanyahu is in the air flying from Israel to the United States, to New York. Again, Biden at the UN. When I heard John Kirby's comments about ceasefire and diplomatic resolutions. I mean, I had to roll my eyes because, again, everything that's taken place, here's what Kirby said. He says, we believe that there are better ways to try to get those Israeli citizens back into their homes up in the north and to keep those that are there safely than in having a war, in escalation. We need to see a diplomatic resolution. How's that worked for you with Gaza so far? Huh? We need a ceasefire, hostage negotiations. It's been a freaking year that all of this is going on. I know that Lindsey Graham basically says you got to call a spade a spade. If Iran is not called out, then this whole fiasco of what's taking place in the UN, it's failed completely. And then we have the rising rhetoric and anger that's now starting to leak out. We're seeing a little bit behind the scenes with Joe Biden and Bibi Netanyahu. It's been clear now, this is from the New York Times, that the Biden administration officials are increasingly open about the president venting his frustrations with Bibi Netanyahu. The national security team do little to hide their frustration regarding the Israeli prime minister, and they openly discuss the president's shouting matches with Netanyahu during telephone calls. The Biden administration is doing all they can to create a scenario to win the election. They don't care. That's my humble opinion. An article from the Remnant News I'm going to encourage you to read. I like this news source. It's talking about a just war, the reasons for the war that's taking place, and applauding Israel for attempting to be as moral as they possibly can. Please read that. There's an article about a documentary that's coming out, I think, today, that's called We Will Dance Again, a documentary about the Nova Music Festival. Interestingly enough, the BBC has said, we'll only show this if we can edit out a certain portion. What did they want to edit out? They wanted to edit out any reference to Hamas as a terrorist organization. Really? They're not a terrorist organization. The director, Yariv Mozar, said, okay, you can do that. We'll let people decide on their own. And then he ended by saying, by the way, if you kidnap grandmothers, if you kidnap babies, if you rape people, if you shoot children in front of their parents, what more? What more do they need to see in order to conclude that Hamas is a terrorist organization? And then there's an important announcement that I'm giving you here. Please take the time, if you're part of our Kafir Global community, to read over that. I'm asking for your assistance and your help to get more people signed up for what we have to offer. It's been weird to see how many people have unsubscribed only to find out that they said, we really didn't unsubscribe. Why are we dropped out of all this? And so take the time, read this article. And then, as I have mentioned with the rockets that are firing all the way in this last slide, I just simply say, can you imagine living under these conditions? It's time. So encourage you to go to the war room. And that war room for us as believers, as you know, is a prayer room. Please be praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Please be praying for the Netanyahu government. Please be praying for the innocent victims on both sides. Now, whether it's Lebanon or whether it's the Palestinians or whether it's the Israelis. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Until next week, God bless you and shalom.